So we listen to hundreds of interviews, watch a ton of so-called informative videos, read a lot of books, listen to so many lectures, binge watch TV shows, plug ourselves to hours of podcasts while passively attending to the mundane chores, which at some point turns into garbled, unintelligible white noise, but at least gives the illusion of learning. And yet, we still crave more information, more data, more input, more tips. And the more we consume, the dumber we feel, which makes us want to consume even more. And round we go. This suffocating trap is the modern idea of learning. Wake up, put as much junk into your brain as humanly possible, and then comes nighttime, hit the bed, and repeat this the next day. And the next, and the next, and the next, and never stop to think what any of it means. Never think for yourself, because you could be spending that time learning a whole lot more. We have grown to conflate noise with knowledge, just like we've been confusing busyness with productivity for decades. We no longer seem capable of learning because we don't even know what it means to learn. And I'm not just saying that. Most of us have no clue what learning is. Just pause this video for a sec and ask yourself, what does learning look like in the real sense? What are the processes that one has to undergo to learn something new? Now you're probably thinking, okay, that's easy. I can give you a very simple definition. We understand the subject and that's how we learn about the subject. And I'm going to tell you that's exactly why you're convinced that by listening to an educational podcast or a lecture, you all of a sudden become an educated individual. I mean, no need to break a sweat when you can simply sit at your desk and read or watch explainers all day, right? Well, I personally wish that was true, since that description fits my former view of learning. But, sorry to burst your bubble, what you think learning is only goes as far as accomplishing the first step. By understanding about a subject, you've only scratched the surface of learning. And listen, we've all come across so many different theories on what learning is, but I'm not here to give you theories or throw Psychology 101 at you or try to sound scientifically accurate by mentioning all the research that has been done about this particular phenomenon. No, I'm here to talk common sense, which has gotten buried under all the lectures you've listened to, all the books you've read, all the stuff you've poured into that cognitive dome of yours without giving it time to breathe. And in that sense, we've all collectively committed intellectual strangulation. It's simply much easier to carry on in that comfortable passive state of consumption than to take the spade and dig out all the dirt. I mean, since it's already deeply buried, it's much easier to keep piling dirt on top of it to dampen the tiniest shred of common sense we've left. So what's the answer here? How can we put a structure in place to ensure that all that time is not being wasted on shallow learning, which is no learning at all? See, the solution I'm about to impart with you is a simple one, but it's not so easy to implement. It's as uncomfortable as it can possibly get, and it requires us to take 3 steps. The first and most crucial step is called silence therapy. You must detach from all sources of information and keep the environment completely silent. No external input for an entire day, only internal input, meaning you put your thoughts to work, recount the last month, what you learned in the past few months, why did you learn those, how can you use it. Retrieve all the information you've absorbed in the past few months. And when you spend a few hours writing down the highlights of what you've consumed in the past, now you try to add your own take to it. But you don't need to force your thoughts to form. No, you must observe your thoughts with no friction, no force. The moment you make thinking your aim, you disrupt the flow. You must not disrupt the flow. And for the flow to form, you have to write everything, even the most mundane, trivial thoughts that passes through your mind. It's important to keep it casual, to keep the expectation as low as you possibly can. It requires practice, but try not to force it. Just allow the insight to form on its own without any sense of attachment. Merely observe yourself, slow down, find a rhythm, and pick a topic and talk about that. It does not really matter what you exactly talk about because the topic is merely a ground you walk upon. The walking itself is the real target. You must keep walking because the period you've spent consuming, you've you've only been sitting and storing fuel without using it. You were entirely passive. Now you have to find a smooth ground to start the thought rolling. And you could be writing about the cup of coffee by your side for all I care. It does not really matter. The real goal here is to bring your mind out of that passive state and get your thought flowing, to cure the mental obesity by creating something and using that mental fuel. And it will be slow at first, but over time you'll pick up the pace and surprise yourself. The key here is that you're finally engaging with the stored information. See, learning doesn't happen in the storage phase. It's in putting that fuel to work that movement happens. It's in walking that you change your scenery and expand your intellectual territory. Otherwise, your mind would be sitting in a stationary mode with no change in location. And the longer you wait, the heavier you get and the harder it becomes to start moving. Now we arrive at the second phase. Now that you've started moving, i.e. ideating, brainstorming, thinking, at some point you'll notice that you are having such a difficult time using the stored information. So you kind of stop midway and doubt that you can ever cover more distance. You might even give up because the movement is really slow and the scenery isn't changing enough for you to notice it and get excited. So this is what I call the mental rough patch. It's part of the route, and this is where most people make the mistake of thinking they simply need more fuel. So they give up on moving and sit around to gather more fuel, not knowing that the more time they spend inactive, the harder it becomes to access it. But you are not going to be like this person. You're going to persevere and endure the hardship of this rocky beginning. You come up with bad ideas after bad ideas, but you never throw in the towel. No, you keep coming up with bad ideas until you run out of bad ideas, and good ideas inevitably greet your mind. And granted, they do not appear often. You keep getting stung by bee after bee. Then you come across one beautiful butterfly, and that makes all the pain fade away like it never happened. So now we arrive at the third phase. Now that you've spent a few days practicing thinking in this way, now comes the time for implementing the 90-10 principle. This is the ratio of consuming information to creating ideas of your own. Meaning, you pick one page out of a book or a line, whatever's up your alley. Again, it doesn't really matter what you pick. In this practice, choosing a topic is like choosing a canvas. The detail of the painting is not going to be impacted by the size of the canvas. Just like the practice earlier in which I mentioned, you could be writing about the cup of tea by your side. It doesn't make a difference because we're focusing on the act of creation. The specificity of what it is you're talking about is beside the point. So pick something that only takes 30 minutes or less to read, and then right after, you start rephrasing it in your own words. Think of what it means in your own terms. Add adjacent concepts you've come across prior to this piece of knowledge and see if you can link it back to this. Draw a graph if that's what it takes for your thoughts to be stimulated, but do not search for anything online. Do not look up something from the web to add to it, because the point here is for your mind to make up new ideas or connect the existing ideas together. Contemplate and let your thoughts be carried by this stream of consciousness. But the key here is to just let it form on its own. And remember, all this should be done in total silence, because it's only in silence that you get to hear your own thoughts. It's only in the absence of noise that everything resurfaces and you get to connect the dots and cement the learning. Our rate of learning has gotten so low because our brain is simply full. There's no empty space for it to stick. There's no hunger because you haven't allowed your mind to be naturally curious, to come up with questions, to wonder and chase after the knowledge for itself instead of force-feeding it unwarranted information. We have destroyed our natural curiosity by bombarding the mind with random input, excessive data that hasn't been called for, hasn't been earned. If you want to plant the seed of an idea, you must dig first and then place it carefully and then water it, tend it, maintain it, consciously care for for it. It won't grow if you haven't found any space for it to reside in. And that digging only happens when you demand your mind to work and think and ideate. When you ask yourself questions and provoke your own curiosity. When you poke holes in your current knowledge, that's when you open up the mental space needed for the seed to be planted. It won't grow unless you put conscious, concerted effort in growing it. And that's how you become faster at gaining knowledge, because now, instead of desensitizing and numbing yourself to information by exposing yourself to it too much, you are taking a very tiny piece of knowledge and mulling it over for such a long time that you become the master of that piece of information. You become the one who rephrases it. So you own it in a way. You're making it your own position. And that's how we learn. We've been just confused this whole time. And now, hopefully, you're going to adopt this strategy and you're going to become an apex learner, because the tiniest piece of information brings up so much question and so much understanding to your mind. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that I can talk to you next time.